Good evening, everyone, and happy Thursday. Happy November as well. I know that this is something kind of not as typical. We're coming to you with a behind the screens live here in the beginning of November, but this season has been different and unlike any other. We're extending the season. Spooky season does not end with October, but will actually be carried on to probably about mid-November because we've got two more episodes left. So I just want to say hello to Michelle, Chris, Janet, and all the other folks who have tuned in tonight. I'm traveling, as you can see, because we've got the historic Scott County Jail open with ghost hunts and flashlight tours and all of that going on right now. So I'm up here in Huntsville, Tennessee area. Hello, Nancy, Johan, Beth. Thank you, everyone, so much for tuning in. So I hope that if you've not watched the most recent episode of Ghost Biker Explorations, we dropped it last night, and it was episode 3 of season 4 here, and it took place in none other than Octagon Hall, which is in Franklin, Kentucky. So I know a lot of you folks have investigated that location and probably have some of your own stories about that as well. So I did try to get Mr. Barry Gaunt, also known as Bear. I tried to get him to come on tonight, but we have been unable to get our schedules to coordinate. So I'm hoping here really soon that I'll be able to get him to come on, because if any of you guys have investigated Octagon Hall before, you will know that he is such a treasure, and he has so much knowledge about this particular location. He's there all the time, runs the tours there. He's with Night Stalkers Paranormal, and helps Billy Bird out. So I know a lot of you guys are familiar with him, and if you've not listened to some of his stories about Octagon Hall, then you need to definitely look him up, because he is just a wealth of knowledge. So it's just gonna be me tonight, and we're gonna be talking a little bit about the past episode. And so if you have any questions or comments or anything, please feel free to put them here in the chat room, and I'll try to get to those, because I am manning the comments as well as trying to carry on a solo conversation. So yes, Beth, Bear A Night Stalkers is absolutely amazing. So like I said, hopefully we'll be able to get our schedules to coordinate, and I'll be able to get him on soon. And Johan says, a wonderful place. We were there earlier this year. A lot of activity in the basement. Yeah, definitely a lot of activity. The basement is an interesting location. Um, I'm going to, let's see, I'm just going to kind of get into just a little bit of the history on that I have here. As a lot of you know, this season I am covering all haunted homes, and it just so happens that out of all these different locations, the first two, the Nickerson Sneed House, which I covered in episodes 1 and episodes 2, had a very unique structure, and we're carrying in with episode 3 with the 8-sided Octagon Hall. It was built or they started building it in 1847, and it was completed in 1859 by Andrew Jackson Caldwell. And from all the research that I had found, it was one of 63 octagon structures that was built. Apparently, back during that time in the 1850s, that was sort of a fad, but it was unique for that area, and it is the only brick octagon structure, or only brick constructed octagon structure that is actually still standing here in the Southeast. So it was built to there were several different reasons that Mr. Caldwell apparently built this house, and one of them was because he didn't like the federal style houses of the time, and that he did want something that was unique. If When you go into this house, I mean, it is a very solid structure, and it actually, the way it's sitting, when you're standing on each side of the house, it does actually face, it faces north. And if you're standing on the back side of the house, you get the lighting from each side as it comes in, and it does face north, east, south, and west directly on the sides and of each of the house. So that was really unique. They also say that Mr. Caldwell was a Mason, and he was one of the highest ranking Masons. I think that they said he was 33 and a third degree Mason, which is the highest, and that the octagon structure does have a lot of symbolism. He within the Masonic Lodge, and that he was actually conducting meetings there. That at one point in time, that this house was not only used as a family residence, but it was also used as a Masonic meeting lodge. Um, there was tragedy that befell the Caldwell family while they were there in this home, starting with Andrew Caldwell's or Andrew Jackson Caldwell's first wife, Lizzie or Elizabeth. She did die at a really young age. I think from my research, I believe she was 30, and that she had died of typhoid fever. And she had three children. She had Fanny, she had Mary Elizabeth, as well as Andrew Caldwell Jr. And that now Fanny, she did live to be an older age. Mary Elizabeth, she did pass away younger. A lot of the pictures that they have in there, she was very young, but I don't have the date in front of me as to when she passed away, but she did pass away at a young age, in a very tragic way. They're not really sure if she was playing or what she was doing down in the winter kitchen, which is down in the basement. But she did end up, the embers from the green wood that they were burning, it did end up sparking out on her, and she got got her dress caught on fire, and she ended up catching on fire down there in the winter kitchen. She didn't pass away immediately. From all accounts, she lived for 7 days, and just an agonizing 7 days. And so tragically, she did pass away, and that's one of the things that they do actually capture a lot there inside of Octagon Hall is a child's voice. And then also Andrew Caldwell Jr., when he was 18 months old, he fell down the staircase there and ended up breaking his neck. So just a lot of tragedy that had befallen this family. The home was very significant during the Civil War, and Andrew Jackson Caldwell, the father, he was a Southern Confederate sympathizer, and he was known to, let soldiers camp there on the property. And at one point, there were, as the soldiers were coming down from Bowling Green and heading down toward Tennessee, he did let, it was essentially thousands of soldiers camped there on the property as they were passing through to Tennessee. And so the Union soldiers, they were aware, and they were often coming by and trying to catch Confederate soldiers there on the property. So they did find the caretakers that are there now. They're constantly doing a lot of work on this location. And so they have found secret tunnels as well as hollow walls, and even removable brick under the porch where they had hidden soldiers during this time. And so and when you look at the outside of the house, you can actually see where some of the brick doesn't exactly match up on certain parts of it. But they have gone in and they have found some of these different hidden tunnels and such. I believe the first time that I investigated there, they had actually discovered one of the tunnels and were in the process of opening that up. And by the second time I went and investigated, they had opened that up. And it was really interesting to just see how the activity changed as they were working on this property and opening up some of these locations. Just absolutely fascinating. I've been investigating this location since back in 2015. And so we used to plan weekends, and we would come up and investigate 2 nights in a row. So definitely a great location that I would recommend checking out. I'm going to look at a few of the comments over here. Uh, yeah, Jim, these were definitely a horrible way to pass, and lots of terrible deaths here. Um, hey, Beth. And thank you, Mark. Yeah, there are a lot of details on this property. Um, let's see. Johan says, did you find the tunnels? They say they are still hidden treasures. Um, I only know the tunnels that Bear had mentioned, but he says that there are definitely more that are on the property, that they're constantly finding more. And then Nancy says any work on property increases activity. Absolutely, because like I said, I've been going there since 2015, and ever since then, I like I said, I know they were in the process of opening a new tunnel at that point. And it was very interesting, and it always seemed like every time I investigated there that that the second night was always a lot, the activity was always much more different than on the first night. I'm not really sure. We would always try to do some of the same experiments to see kind of how that would change, but it always seemed like the second night there was always an uptick and increase in activity there. um, Dr. Sumner says it is a great place to investigate a lot of history and not just inside of the house. And she is definitely correct on that. So this whole property complex, if you will, when you get off the road there in Franklin, Kentucky, they still have the outside kitchen, or the summer kitchen, still standing. One of the slave quarters, I know that Mr. Caldwell had quite a number of slaves at one time on the property, and I believe the last slave quarter house fell just over the past, I think it was over the past year, past 2 years. I'm not exactly sure, but that last one had actually fallen. But there are multiple barns. I think there are three, I believe, 3 or 4 that are still standing. The family cemetery plot is still there. And then also, if you hike on down past the property, the slave graveyard, as well as several unknown soldiers, are buried in this little grove of trees. And Mr. Caldwell kept to his same architectural style as what he had with the house, and also planted the trees there around the slave graveyard. In the same octagon shape. So, so it was definitely a shape and a symbol that was truly important to him. Um, Hello, Sarah. Thank you so much for tuning in, and Scott. Thank you guys very much for tuning in tonight. Beth says that is definitely her favorite location and owns a piece of her heart. Um, the home, which is there in Franklin, Kentucky, in Simpson County. It is, it seems to me that this town, I mean, there are a lot of really cool places to investigate here and a lot of history just in Franklin, Kentucky alone. If you're not familiar with where it's located, if you're here in Tennessee like I am, you essentially, head up 24 to Nashville and then go about an hour north of Nashville, just right across the Kentucky line and it's in South Central Kentucky over there. Um, just for me, it's about a 3.5 hour ride up there, but it's a beautiful area. The Old Stone Jail is located there. Simpson County Historical Society. If you go up there, I highly recommend taking a full weekend and investigating both Octagon Hall as well as the Old Stone Jail, just right in that area. A lot of unique and interesting history. Rebecca says, I had an amazing time there. Thanks to Beth Allen for surprising us. Yeah, I know, like I said, I had been going up there, and the archives at the time when I first started going was located there at the Old Stone Jail. And so now they actually have that open where you can investigate. And they have a really great historical society and archives there. Very, very thorough. And I know that you can also investigate in there when you do the Old Stone Jail. So it is very cool. Johan asks, I haven't investigated the Old Stone Jail yet. How does it compare in activity? Um, it's I really enjoyed it. It for me, it was a fairly quiet night at the jail. Um, but I mean, just the history and being in there are a lot to investigate. I haven't actually gone through all of my evidence that we had there, so it's kind of hard for me to say since I've been investigating Octagon Hall for so long. So it's a little bit harder for me to say how it compares, but because the hall for me is one that that is active every time I go. The disembodied voices, they're kind of off the chain sometimes at that location. I don't think I've ever been to Octagon Hall where I've not gotten some type of activity or especially some type of disembodied voice or had some type of personal experience. Um, just getting into the history just a little bit more about Octagon Hall. It again, it was very significant during the Civil War, and the Union soldiers, they did come in there and take over the home, and they were very, very unkind to the Caldwell family. I've seen some different reports of some of the things that they experienced, and I'm sure probably don't even know the half of it, um, because they were so just nasty to the family. They did come in and they did butcher all of their cattle. They did poison their well water and just completely mistreat the family. There is a section of the house that they call the sick room or the hospital. It's up on the third floor, and well, it's technically, I guess, the second floor unless you count the basement. So the second slash third floor. It's a big area, and that's where I actually had one of my first experiences with. We were playing Amazing Grace. This would have been one of the first night that I was there. We were playing Amazing Grace there in the sick room hospital, and it was just myself and another female in there. And while we were playing, we actually caught a woman humming Amazing Grace on the chorus, which was really cool. And then we did a prayer afterwards for the sick soldiers who were in there, and captured a male voice come over as we were praying, and it said Amen at the end. And there were no men inside of the house. There were 5 men or excuse me, 4 men on the property, but they were outside, and so there was no men in there. but the hospital is very active. The cupola on the top of uh, Octagon Hall is really interesting and has a lot of different types of activity if you care to venture up there. It's a little bit challenging. You got to climb the ladder and get up in there. And when I first investigated there, they actually didn't have that part open just yet. However, they did as I progressed and continued to investigate there, they did have it open, and we did several different sessions in there. One of the interesting stories about that, and I do cover that in the history, is that Mr. Caldwell, he did keep bees up there in the cupola, and that it was said that at times, if he had Confederate soldiers on the property, he would dress them in bee suits, take them up to the cupola. And whenever the Union soldiers would come and they would open it up to try to go up there would be bees swarming, so they wouldn't go in. There's also the story of a Confederate soldier who was hiding up there. He was injured, and he was hiding up there, and it gets really hot up there. So if you're investigating there during the summer months, you can actually kind of experience how hot it gets up there in the cupola. But he was up there for actually quite an extended period of time, and so he ended up bleeding out and passing away up there due to the extreme heat and due to his injuries. So there is a Confederate soldier that's up there, and sometimes he can be a little more aggressive in his activity, but that is one that we've experienced, and we've got Billy Sims on here, and he's one. He works with Bear with Night Stalkers Paranormal, and that I've seen no truer statement. Nothing surprises us at the hall. That is definitely true, and just some of the different stories and stuff that I've heard coming from other investigators from there. Um, they have had some really cool experiences. The full bodied apparitions that people see there is quite amazing as well. Um, and again, when I get Bear on here to talk about it, um, just the wide range of experiences that people have here at this location, um, it's unlike anywhere I've ever investigated, in the fact that there's not only paranormal activity on the property, but also UFOs have been sighted there, as well as Bigfoot activity. I've never actually gone Bigfoot. I've never done any Bigfoot research, but the first small amount that that I got to do was actually there on the property, and it was back just past the slave graveyard, going out to the third barn, and we were actually getting knocks and hollers in, or calls, in return to what we were putting out there. It was really quite surprising and interesting. Like I said, this location has a lot. It's said to be on ley lines, and it has the limestone foundation as well as the caves. So it's really in a unique location there. Um, Dr. Sumner, which I want to thank her for helping me with filming of this one. As you guys know, I either investigate solo or with a videographer, and she's been very kind to step in and help me with the filming of this one. And she brings up a good point. I'm not a believer in orbs per se, but the light anomaly that was caught in the basement of the hall is unexplainable. Um, it was not dust, and it was not a reflection. That was something that was kind of interesting on this one, was that we were down there filming. We had been filming. I think we started investigating uh, a little bit after 4 o'clock that evening, and or no, excuse me, 5 o'clock. We'd gotten up there around 5 and investigated up until very, very early in the morning. And I believe this was sometime around between 1 and 2. We had investigated all over, and so we had gone down to the basement level, and down in the basement, uh, down in the basement is the winter kitchen, as well as lots and lots of different Civil War uh, relics and archive material, genealogical material. I mean, they've really found a lot of relics and a lot of really interesting pieces on the property that is that's stored downstairs in the basement area. And so we had been investigating downstairs, and we had just gone into the genealogy, the research center room there, and we had done an EVP session as well as a rod session, and didn't really get a whole lot on the rods at that time, but we had been doing that session down there, and in that room, just it really felt different in comparison to the others that we had been investigating down there. And so as we were sitting there, we were catching all these knocks and moans. And of course, I had my headphones on, and I like to investigate in real time with the recorder, have that playing, and because you can hear that in the moment, and it makes everything else kind of loud. It's kind of hard to hear anything else going on other than what the recorder has. And so yeah, we were just sitting there listening, and I kept hearing these these moans and these knocks. And um as we're doing that, I, I just have an orb that just comes up, and it just kind of hovers around my face. Um, as Dr. Sumner said, watch Ghost Bikers episode on this location. Um, it's unexplainable. It was not a reflection, and it could not be debunked at the time. We did try to debunk that once because I couldn't see it. She could see it as she was filming, and so I was wearing a body camera on my neck. And now there's multiple times during the filming where Dr. Sumner is filming me head on, and so you can see that there, I mean, it's not casting an IR reflection or anything like that during the entire night that we're filming. But what's interesting is the body camera died just before this orb appeared. So when I'm in the kitchen, you can see the IR light and everything that's on. When we're filming downstairs in that room, there's no IR light on, which is really interesting. So it's not casting a reflection. We do hold the hand up over, and both she and I are trying to see if we can feel anything, whether it be spider web, um, reflection. And if it was a reflection, then it would block it, with the hand in front. So anyway, so we were really trying our best to debunk that. And then of course, when we went back and watched the video, it was really quite odd. It definitely unlike anything that I've experienced myself there. Um, let's see some of the comments here. Mark says, and Mark is there in Kentucky as well. He says, I've seen strange mist and fog toward the woods before sunset. And Dee Dee has pointed out the cat. Yes, my my cat is over there. He's Pixel. Him and Cheeto are traveling with me through the week when I come to the jail, and so yeah, he wanted to be on tonight. And as Billy says, it was a really nice catch, Dr. Chris Sumner. Absolutely. And, we'll continue to look at that and essentially try to debunk it. It's interesting because I noticed, and I'm not a huge orb person myself, just because a lot of the time when it comes to orbs in photography, I'm able to essentially explain a lot of what I catch when it comes to orbs. A lot of the time it's condensation, bugs, dust, that sort of thing. And there were some dust orbs um, that I saw, on this particular video. how do you not have that whenever you have such an old location? But there were a few in several of the different rooms that we had gone in that really did seem to behave a lot different than your typical dust, or typical bugs. There was more of I know one in particular, that I had seen, and you'll see if you go back and watch the video. It had a lot more of a controlled movement to it, and it did kind of hover around the equipment, and we did seem to get several different EVPs when these particular orbs had shown up. So, again, just a great talking point. I am always open for discussion, and always keep an open mind at that sort of thing, because, like I said, a lot of the time that those anomalies can be explained, but there are special circumstances. I think that I think they do require our attention to look at. Don't always discount them, but go in and try to look at everything that's going on around. Again, this particular night, it was a very clear night. Um, there was a little road noise at times because there is a busy road, there in front of Octagon Hall. But as the night goes on, it does get quieter. And it was, for when I investigated it there in June, um, it was interesting because it was actually quite a cool day for the particular season that I investigated. It had been surrounded by very hot days, and then a drop in the temperature. So, which for me, I always tend to get a lot more activity when it's a little bit cooler. So, uh, let's see here. Dr. Sumner, yes, it was crazy and awesome at the same time. Definitely something that it made us kind of stop and take notice. Rebecca, thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you watching the show, and we love you guys. So thank you so much for tuning in. Let's see here. Billy says you were also experiencing a cold spot at the same time. And he is correct. Combine all of those things together. I always like to keep my EDI plus box in these locations when I'm investigating. And so we had that one down there. I believe that the temperature was, at that point in time, was sitting like right around 70. And I was experiencing some extreme cold at that point, which is what I was focusing the most on, since I couldn't see what was in front of me with my own eyes. And then also we were getting the moan, and on the EDI box, just before all of this started occurring, I was getting pressure changes. And so it became pretty significant at that point. I think it was continually changing, and it hadn't been changing up until then. So it was the cold spots, the pressure change, the moaning, and then also being able to capture the anomaly on film. So just a lot of different things combined, and that's how I really like to do when I'm investigating, is really look not just at one tool, but look at, and when you can get multiple tools acting together to corroborate, that just, to me, that just kind of leads more to potentially unexplained activity. So, so yeah, that's definitely a good point. We were experiencing all that at the same time. Let's see. Nancy says it was trying to touch you. Very good possibility. When we were doing the walkthrough with Bear in the very beginning, something did touch my leg from Mary Elizabeth's room, from under the bed, and you know, we were getting responses on the Ovilus that was corroborating that. You know, every time I went into that room, I was getting something on the Ovilus about touch, which was really interesting. And as Susan says, it almost seemed playful. That's exactly how I would would have described it. It did, and that was kind of the movement in some of the other areas. It did seem to be playful, um, like it maybe possibly wanted to have been seen. Um, Janet says, I might have missed this, but was the daddy a disembodied voice? Um, it was. It was. We were actually hearing a lot of the responses that we were getting. Very few of them. Um, some of them we actually could understand what they were saying in the moment. The others, it was more. Um, it was more we heard something, but we didn't know what it said until after we went back and was reviewing the evidence. But I did get several child's voices. I think it was either three or four different times caught a child, and to me, the voice sounded very similar each time. The daddy was definitely a disembodied voice. The high that we got was a disembodied voice, and then at one point we did a couple different spirit box sessions, one in the hospital room and one there in Mary Elizabeth's room. And at one particular time, we did have a disembodied voice. You can actually hear that it's not coming from the SB7, but actually coming over it. So we were getting a disembodied voice there as well. And it sounded to me to be the same child. Another interesting point that we did get throughout the episode is we did get the name Andrew several times. And as I had mentioned earlier, the homeowner, the builder, the father, his name was Andrew. At one point, we asked who the president is at this time, and of course, at that time, it could have either been Abraham Lincoln or it could have been Andrew Johnson, depending on the year. It would have fallen right in that time frame when all of the activity was happening. And so we did get Andrew when we asked who the president was, and that was a disembodied voice. It didn't come over the SB7. It did come out of the air. And so yeah, that was really interesting that we did keep getting his name. Um, and so of course you have the him, and then you also have the son, and you have the president at that time. So uh, that was let's see, trying to think, because again, like I said, it was a pretty active night the whole time. We were playing the music. Music tends to be a pretty good trigger object for me, and it worked really well there at that house. Um, when we started playing some Confederate music, we did capture a male's voice over the first song. If you go back and you listen to when we're playing it, and I apologize, I wasn't able to play the entire song while we're doing this, but if you're a content creator on YouTube, you have to be careful about playing what music you play. And so if you're playing a song during an investigation, you can get dinged with a copyright if you play the entire song. And then also, if you're not, you can play it some if you're, talking over it. So whenever I was editing the video, I was unable to play the entire session. So that's why that is. But if you listen to the first song, you will actually hear there is a male's voice that comes over. It is better when you listen to it with headphones. And again, there were no males on the property. Bear was there during the intro of the investigation, showed us around, and then it was just myself and Dr. Sumner on the property the remainder of the night. So there's that, and then we were also getting blips on the flashlight, which we hadn't had flashlight activity down there until we started playing Dixieland. So that was uh, another thing. Something else that was really kind of interesting and different was before I got there. that Octagon Hall is open during the day for daytime tours of their Civil War museum, and then they close down at 2:30, 3 o'clock, and open up for paranormal investigations. And so, just before I got there, as a lot of you know, I am an artist, and so I always like to draw the different locations that I investigate. And so I had drawn a picture of Octagon Hall, and I gave it to Bear. It was a year ago when I had given it to him, and so they have a copy of it hanging there on the staircase. And so when I came in, uh, Bear showed me that the picture had fallen just a few hours before I was supposed to arrive. So um, coincidence? I don't believe in coincidences, but just a interesting and eerie uh, thing that happened beforehand. And so he was hanging it up again. Yeah, as Billy says, your picture. So that was interesting. I can't say that I've ever had something that personal happen before I was at a location, but I know that Bear and Night Stalkers are very connected with those spirits there at that location, and that he had informed them that we were coming. So, um, so I have to agree with Billy that they knew we were coming, which was definitely interesting. Um, Jim Cody says, I always enjoy hearing the experiences at the different locations, especially around the old cemetery. I still love the history of the places. And, that's what we definitely like to cover here whenever I go to the specific locations. I actually wanted to spend more time investigating outside and at the slave graveyard, also in the cornfield, because I know that there were some skirmishes back there. It's interesting. The property is really large, and so I mentioned that there's multiple barns. There is a cornfield out there where that had happened, and it leads up to a train track that's back there. And so, as a lot of you know, that whenever you're, uh, uh, if whoever owns the rails, they're the ones who can, it's a great advantage to them during the war. And so, they were constantly trying to attack the Union was trying to attack the rails back there at the house, which made the house more of a target as well. So in past investigations, um, gone back there with smoke bombs and pop guns and that sort of thing, and it really does seem to trigger some of the different activity. On this particular night, I didn't really feel. I like to let the house kind of lead me to what experiments to do and that sort of thing. And I just wasn't really feeling it as much out there. We did get on the obelisk just before we were about to go outside. We did get the word slave, which was kind of interesting just before we went down to the slave graveyard. But they were doing some type of night construction on the road just down, and so when I went out there was quite a bit of noise pollution outside that night, on down the road, as far as doing outside investigating, which can kind of be a challenge. Plus, it was pretty cold, so didn't spend a whole lot of time out there uh, doing that. It was interesting that Bear told me afterwards, on into town, they had actually had a really bad power outage that night, and so uh, but we never lost power there at Octagon Hall. So that was something um, that they had actually experienced over in town. So we did investigate outside, and then we did come back in and finish out the investigation. I do want to, let's see if I can pull it up here. Um, I did have some footage, um, or I did have some bonus footage here that I kind of wanted to take a few minutes and talk about. Uh, I'm going to show that. See if I can get this pulled up, and talk a little bit more about it. So some of you guys, if you've ever listened to some of the podcasts that I've done, I've talked about it briefly on that. I'll also talk about it sometimes at some of the different events and such that I speak at. But I wanted to kind of share just a little bit about my very first experience, that I had there with something that I do called subconscious sketching. So let me see if I can pull this up here and share this. So let me go ahead and start it.
On my second investigation here at Octagon Hall, I had a really unique experience. I was experimenting with something I like to call subconscious sketching. It's like automatic writing, but with drawing and using paranormal equipment. On this night, I was drawing in the winter kitchen and I drew this figure. The very next day, I was really surprised when I met the man that I drew. It was none other than caretaker Barry Gaunt, aka Bear.
Okay, so let me just kind of stop on that screen there if I can get it to stop there. Um, well, maybe. Let me just stop it at this point.
Surprised when I met the man that I drew. It was
Okay, so like I said, it's something that, I do draw, and every now and then I'll draw at these different locations. Depending on what I'm doing, I'll sometimes kind of, if I can get myself in a relaxed and calm state, I typically don't video it. I may do some in the future, but I typically don't video it for the investigations, or excuse me, I typically don't video it for the episodes. However, when I go in there, sometimes if I can get in a relaxed state, I do like to to draw what I see. And every now and then I'll start to sense different features. It may be something, as simple as high cheekbones, a narrow nose, kind eyes, a beard, that sort of thing. I never actually will see a full feature of a person. It's always just, or a full figure of a person. It's always just features. And so I was experimenting with this. I was drawing in the winter kitchen. And what I like to do is I like to just kind of have a real candid conversation with the spirits in there. And I always ask them if they will give me someone or something that I'm able to identify. And so I'll set my paranormal equipment up, typically K2 meters, EDI box, REM pod, flashlights, different items that will respond to yes or no questions. And so on this particular night, I didn't know what I was going to be drawing, but I always draw by, either candlelight or just like really really fine flashlight. So I keep it pretty dark. And so if you're familiar with automatic writing, the people typically don't, they go into, a different state of awareness, and they typically don't know what they're writing. It's typically spirit led. And so I kind of liken this to that. And so as I was drawing, I started to see certain things about the eyes, certain things about the face. And so what I would do when I would see these, I would ask to see if I could get some type of validation from, from the paranormal equipment. And so as I'm drawing this, when I asked, okay, do you have a beard? I'm seeing a beard. I would get a light on the K2 meter, or I would get a light on, the EDI box. So something to confirm it. And so I would just continue to draw. So I actually thought on that particular night that I was probably, this is where you don't need to go in with a preconceived notion, because most of the time it's not going to be correct. And so I thought I was going to be drawing a older slave lady, and possibly a cook. But as I'm drawing, I start drawing this man. And so I was seeing kind of the white in the beard. I couldn't see hair. And so as I'm drawing it, I'm asking the question, I'm like, are you bald? Um, why am I not seeing the hair? And so it's like, oh, are you wearing a hat? And so the meter starts lighting up. So start drawing this hat. And so as I was doing this, I really thought that maybe it was a soldier or a slave trader. And so I draw this picture, and I end up putting it away. They have a ton of pictures there inside of Octagon Hall, and so I thought maybe that I would kind of sit down and see if there was something that matched up in any of these pictures. And so again, this was my second time investigating there, and it was the first night of the weekend. So I drew, went back to the hotel, slept, went back for the second night of investigating. And so when I come in there and we're setting up, the team that I was investigating with, because this was back before I did before I started Ghost Biker, and the guy who was helping me set up there, he comes in and he's like, "Hey, you're gonna want to meet this guy." And so he's like, "And when you come out, bring your sketchbook." And so as soon as I come out, I mean, it was I was floored whenever I saw Bear, because I mean, I felt like the what I had drawn and what the spirits had described was this man that was standing in front of me. And so my thinking is, and of course, I show the picture to Bear, and so we were both absolutely floored by it. So that was my first meeting of him, and my first experience with actually being able to match this up. So I didn't expect to meet someone who was actually living, but I believe that he and his team have such a strong connection with this location that they were describing to me somebody that I was able to either connect with or identify with. So just something kind of um, different, and like I said, a little bit bizarre that you know that it happened, but definitely something that created a special connection between Bear and I, and also this particular location. So I have drawn at several different other places and been able to match up. It's never been anybody living that I met then, but it is something that I do. I may do it at some point and either do it live or do it on an episode. I just, for me, I feel like it's something I have to go into that state where um, I have to be very calm and relaxed about it. And I, I'm still trying to figure out this whole gift, and grow and develop that. So it's something that I feel like has always sort of been a private thing between myself and the spirit. So I haven't wanted to highlight it live, but maybe at some point I will. I have drawn a couple more disturbing things at a few locations, but that's another story for another time. But thank you all so much for letting me share that, and I really felt honored to be able to share that as part of this episode. And I wanted to explain it a little bit more because it was sort of a bonus feature. I did get some interesting EVPs while I was doing that particular drawing, um, but I did not record video of that session. So, but I do totally agree, Nancy. I think that they do appreciate him and the work that he does at that location in sharing their stories. He is definitely a big advocate for them, as well as the other folks, the other Night Stalkers that work there. And at some point, I will definitely um, maybe put that out there as do a video of that. Um, so thank you guys so much for your kind words. And And I totally agree, Janet. Everybody loves Bear, living and dead. um, so, I mean that pretty much sums up this episode. Um, and as Jim says, reminds me of remote viewing in a way. Absolutely, absolutely. I know that I can't remember. Is it Amy Allen or there's another person that does remote viewing, and maybe that is what it's called and what it is. Like I said, for me, I'm really trying to um, I'm really trying to figure it out a little bit more, because it is like I said, you just never know. And I'm kind of a perfectionist, and so when I'm doing my regular drawings, I mean, I spend 8 to 10 hours. With this, I typically, if I can have a good hour and a half to kind of sit there and like I said, I have to really feel comfortable. I'm actually doing a residential in 2 weeks, where a lady has requested that I come in and draw. And so this is going to be my first time coming in and doing this. I did request that she not tell me anything about what is going on at her house. It's not anything negative or anything like that. I don't really want to know. She does kind of know who she thinks she may uh, have a message from, if you will. And so I told her I don't want to know any of that. I want to go in and see if I can pull something. So so that will definitely be interesting. And that may be the case. It may be more of a remote viewing thing. I just always kind of called it subconscious sketching because it kind of reminded me a little bit of automatic writing. So you never know. We'll see kind of how this goes and see. Maybe at some point I'll share some more of the drawings that I've done at different locations. But this one just definitely seemed fitting for Octagon Hall. So again, thank you all so much for letting me share that. Um, let's see. Dr. Sumner says Nancy Weems, she will probably put a camera and a tripod. Yes, that is true. When I do these, I do like to be alone, because it's one of those things where honestly, for me to do it, I have to be in it's not something that I can force. It's not something at this time. Maybe once I kind of grow and develop it a little bit more, it might be something that I'm able to do more on command. It's not as much like that, but it is definitely for me. It is definitely a personal thing. And so when I did draw this one, when I started drawing it, there uh, from the team that I used to be on, the gentleman was in the room during the first part of the drawing. And, I always feel like when we go to these different locations, people have their own style of investigating. And, you know, they don't always want to, if I'm sitting here drawing, they don't always want to be just sitting there while I'm doing that, want to be out actively investigating and that sort of thing. So he was with me for the first half. But for me, it definitely takes some time. And so yeah, it would definitely probably be a personal thing. Um, and then let's see, Dee Dee says, even if you only do for your own viewing, yes, absolutely. It is something that when I do this residential in 2 weeks and do the drawing for her, it's something I'm definitely going to set a camera up and uh, put that on there so that I can actually have it, because I like to keep the camera rolling anyways. I've learned as soon as you go to a location, you need to have that recorder going, and if you can get video going as soon as you're there, because you just never know when the activity is going to start. It doesn't always start when you start actively investigating, so definitely like to keep that camera going, just because you never know. It's like when you do the Estes method, always having the camera on you when you're like doing the active, listening, or if you're doing the asking of questions. It's always good to have the camera going, because you never know what you might capture when you're doing this investigating, so and doing the Estes method and such. So yeah, I'll definitely be recording video whenever I do it. So next week actually have a great location. I mean, this season has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you guys bearing with us as again, typically it would air every Tuesday night during October, but with starting the new business and all the travel that I'm having to do, because I'm having to travel weekly across the state, so I've not been able to be as consistent this season, but it's been a lot of fun, and it's been really cool to cover these haunted homes and to essentially have a theme this season. And they've not disappointed. Nickerson Sneed was one that I got a lot more activity than I realized I got. Um, Enough to want to go back and do a follow-up investigation and getting to investigate with Jake. Um, just awesome. And then with Octagon Hall, next week we will actually be covering. We'll be going down south to Florida and highlighting the Ma Barker house. I am only one of two investigative teams who have actually had the opportunity to investigate this location. Dr. Christy Sumner with Soul Sisters being the first team that got to do a very extensive investigation there and got some really cool activity. So I'm the second team that's been there, and for me too, it was also a very active night. So we've covered places in Virginia, Kentucky. Now we're heading to Florida. If everything goes as it should, that episode will be dropping next Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And then we will be doing a follow up Behind the Screams Live, where I will have Dr. Sumner on here with me, to where we'll be sharing some different things. She'll be talking a little bit about this particular investigation and this location, as well as um, her her investigation there the first time that they came in. So really looking forward to being able to highlight that. And then we got some really special cool things planned for the season finale. So like I said, spooky season does not die with October. It carries on into November, and we'll be covering it here with some special things. So thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening to me. These lives that you do solo, I mean, they're kind of hard. So thank you guys for the wonderful comments and your questions. And because you never know when you're sitting here kind of talking, by yourself, just how it is. So again, so we I definitely appreciate that. And Jim says, we got snow in the Smoky Mountains and you're going to Florida. Not fair. I'm back now, but just want to kind of step back before we jump off here. Um, had a you know I had a great Halloween weekend in Florida. I was down at Crystal Harley Davidson down in the Nature Coast, doing a haunted motorcycle ride event. I know I'd seen a bunch of posts from all of you guys that looked like there were some great Halloween celebrations going on. A lot of cool videos were dropped this past week. Really enjoyed watching those. I should have a video here real soon. Once, I kind of want to get through the season, but I'm going to have a video with some of the sights and stuff from the event in Florida. Um, Got to meet a lot of really cool people that I talked to here on Facebook, but haven't got to meet in person. Got to meet them when I was down in Florida. It was a 2-day event. On October 30th, we had a meet and greet there at Crystal Harley Davidson, and there was a band, Silverback. They played and had tarot card readers, as well as people who do art for motorcycles, pinstriping art uh, down there. It was just a costume contest, big meet and greet celebration. Got to give a presentation about what I do. And then on October 31st, on Halloween, we had a haunting ride with Ghost Biker. where we traveled the Nature Coast. It was really cool. Got to go through several different haunted areas, some that I can't wait to go back to, the May Stringer House being one of them. But we started there, traveled around, um, went through several really pretty areas with some haunting and historical backstories. Circled down through Brooksville. Brooksville has 6 or 8 different haunted locations, and then went on back up through Homosassa and Crystal River. So it was a good time. We had about 35 bikes that joined us on the ride, and it was just a good time had by everybody. Um, so thank you guys so much that came out and saw us. And thank you to my friend Sarah Jane for coming with me and for helping me out, helping me set up my table and just being my travel buddy on this trip. So again, I appreciate you all. Until next Tuesday night, just kind of keep an eye out for different posts and updates on when the show is going to be releasing. But as of right now, fingers crossed, everything is scheduled for Tuesday. If it doesn't hit Tuesday, it will drop Wednesday, and we will do this same live next Thursday night. So until then, watch out for motorcycles and have a great week, and we'll see you all soon. Bye bye.